Okay, good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to see you on this chilly morning. My name is Lorraine. I'm co-chair with Mark for the forum. And so we're happy to be able to offer another forum to you. Our presenter today is Eddee Daniels, and he will be introduced by his host, Rod Depew. So.
Good morning. Eddee Daniel is a Milwaukee-based photographer, writer, and arts educator. His work focuses on the intersection of nature and culture. He has served on the boards of Milwaukee River Keeper, Friends of Hank Aaron State Trail, and Preserve Our Parks. He curates a website and blog, The Nature Realm, for Preserve Our Parks. He has been an artist in residence in unusual venues, including Milwaukee, Menominee Valley, University of Wisconsin, Trout Lake Field Station in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee's Harbor District. Eddie and his wife, Lynn, are friends of ours from our years as members of UUCW. Welcome, Eddee Daniel.
Thank you, thank you. Are we a little late? We had a lot of trouble with the technology, but we seem to be up and running. I hope that this goes well. I'm here to share with you something about my pictures about the Milwaukee River Greenway. How many of you know what I'm talking about when I say Milwaukee River Greenway? So most of you seem to be familiar with it. I have, as an artist in residence for the River Revitalization Foundation, I created a book for them about the Milwaukee River Greenway, which I'll share with you at the end if we have time. But I want to start. I don't know, I didn't hear all of my introduction, but I'm a former teacher. And as a former teacher, I like to start with an introductory quiz. You don't have to, this is voluntary if you want. So I want you to take a look at these pictures. 1, 2, and 3. Question, do you recognize the city of Milwaukee in these 3 pictures? If you do, you're among the privileged few because this is not a well-known place, unfortunately, which is what I'm all about. The quiz continues. How many of you know who designed Riverside Park? Just raise your hand if you think you know. Chances are, if you've ever heard of any landscape architect, it's Frederick Law Olmsted, and he is the one. He also designed Washington Park and Lake Park. There are 12 parks, named parks in the Greenway. Which one is largest? Now, if you don't know what parks are in the Greenway, you're not going to know this, but anybody think they know what park is the largest? That one, but do you know what that is? Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park is also the 3rd largest Milwaukee County park. Who knows what I mean by the blue hole? Anybody? Sir. This is what it looks like now. It used to be a quarry, and it's across from Estabrook Park. And I will tell you a little bit more about it later in the program. It's now a pond, as you can see. Where was this full-scale, full-blown amusement park 100 years ago? How many think you know? Several of you. Hubbard Park, correct. This is what Hubbard Park looks like today. Although Hubbard Park, by the way, is small, Hubbard Park is only 4.7 acres, and the amusement park was like 12 acres. It went all the way from the river to Oakland Avenue at the place where Hubbard Park is now. Okay, what is a greenway? Basic question. A ring of open space around a city, the riparian fringe of vegetation along a river, a roadway flanked by parkland along narrow park. It could be any one of these, and the Milwaukee River Greenway is all of them except A. The Milwaukee County Park System is essentially A. There are many parks, but there is a ring of parkland along the rivers in Milwaukee County. So we are blessed in Milwaukee with all of these things, which is a wonderful thing. What is the name of the trail that links together the entire greenway? Who thinks they know? That's a good guess, but it is not true. I'm sorry? No, is there a park, a trail name? No. Anybody else? So the Oak Leaf Trail, of course, is an important trail, but it doesn't connect the entire greenway. It veers off to the lakefront at Riverside Park, and there's more greenway below that. What does link? Here's a hint. The river is a trail. It is a nationally recognized national urban water trail, recognized by the National Park Service as an urban water trail. And the urban water trail is much bigger than the greenway. So station break time. So I'm here representing Preserve Our Parks, and specifically I'm the director of a project that we call A Wealth of Nature, which is about parks all over southeastern Wisconsin. So I'm talking about the Greenway today, but I do talks like this about parks all over southeastern Wisconsin. I think I've spoken here once before about this, maybe quite a while ago now, before the pandemic. So it's been a while. But that project is encouraging people to get out. I'll get back to that. So how many of you have heard of Preserve Our Parks before? More than usual when I ask that question. So about half of you. Preserve Our Parks is an advocacy organization. We're not associated with the park system or any park system. We're an independent nonprofit organization, and we're watchdogs. We protect the parks in ways that the parks themselves can't by law. So, for example, we have brought lawsuits against places that are trying to develop in parks and that sort of things, and the county can't do that. The mission of this project that I spearhead is to get people outdoors and to encourage them to support the parks and pass that on to the next generation. Back to, and we do that primarily through our website. I mean, I give talks like this one and I tell people about it, but primarily we have a website, and I hope you'll all check it out. I have cards on the table over there and brochures for all of you to pick up afterwards if you want one, and it will give you the URL and you can check it out at your leisure. We also have a blog, which I keep up regularly. It includes guest contributions by other people. It's not just about me. And about half of the blog posts are mine and about half are other people's. And you can subscribe if you go up there and subscribe, or I have a list for you to sign up for if we have time afterwards. But back to the Greenway. So here's a map of the Greenway. Do we have to have that thing over there in the way? I guess it's not in the way. So you see the map. Lincoln Park is at the top, the big one, the big glop at the top. But most of it, as you can see, is long and skinny. But what I like to do is compare this 878 acres to a park everybody's heard of in New York. Central Park, also designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, is less than 878 acres. It's about 800 acres. So they're comparable in size, and everybody's heard of it. Not only nationally, it's internationally well known. Who's heard of the Milwaukee River Greenway? And it is arguably as good as, in many ways, Central Park. It's not in New York, of course, but why is Milwaukee short-shrifted on this? So one of my motivations in producing a book about this is to make it more well-known. It all began with a dam. And this is not the original dam, but this was, I think this was around 1921. The original dam was built in 1843 by Byron Kilbourne, and his idea, believe it or not, was to create a canal from Milwaukee that connected to the Rock River and thence to the Mississippi River. He was about 50 years too late because his model was the Erie Canal, which was highly successful, but he only got 1.5 miles, and then he went bankrupt, and it didn't work because the railroads came in. Canals were no longer the way to go. But this is what this looks like today. So you notice how little vegetation there was back then. Now it's a greenway for good reason. The place where the dam was is still there. It's now a pedestrian bridge. This is one of the few factories that were built along what is now the Greenway. Historically, it's a massive place. It was next to Riverside. It's where Riverside Park is now. And this is what this looks like today. Pretty much the same viewpoint. That factory built heavy industry materials. In World War I, it built tanks for the war effort. This is the Gordon Park bathhouse. Gordon Park is across the river from Riverside Park. And this was very popular until the river got too polluted to spend time down there. We'll get back to that. But this is what this looks like today. All that's left of that grand bathhouse is that little wall down in the lower right corner of the picture, full of graffiti now. All right. So before I take you on a tour of all the parks in the Greenway real quickly, just the Greenway is not an accident, and it has not been a Greenway for very long, not technically a Greenway. I mean, it's always been green, right? When the river got too polluted for people to enjoy it anymore, nobody went there. Not only did they not go swimming in the river anymore, but they stopped going down to the parks along the river. This was in the mid 20th century. By 1945, nobody went to the river anymore, and the land became essentially urban wilderness, a term I like to use. It also became dangerous. But the Greenway came back because of the efforts of many people, especially the Urban Ecology Center, the Milwaukee Riverkeeper Organization, and the River Revitalization Foundation. These three nonprofit organizations were the spearhead organizations that created what is now almost universally appreciated by those who know about it as an urban asset. So we're going to start at Lincoln Park on the north end. I didn't point this out, but you saw that it's 8 miles long. So from Silver Spring down to Humboldt, almost to Humboldt, it is 8 miles, linear miles. This is just real quickly, of course. Lincoln is a large park and has many things in it, like playing fields, a water park, a golf course, but also big enough to be lots of natural space. The next park down on the east bank is Estabrook Park. Estabrook Park boasted a beach at one point. I asked you about the Blue Hole. The Blue Hole was a quarry. Before it became a lake, they were quarrying limestone out of that quarry to make cement. The Milwaukee Cement Company was the largest cement manufacturer in the country at one time, and very successful until somebody invented a better kind of concrete somewhere else. And this limestone was special and was good for making concrete, but it was no longer sought after. So they stopped quarrying the limestone and it became a pond. Long story short, kids were swimming in that pond and sometimes they drowned. This was back in the 19-teens about, okay? Well, the county bought Estabrook Park from the cement company. This quarrying took place in Estabrook Park on the other side of the river and in the river. They actually moved the channel of the river in order to quarry parts of the river. So when this tragedy happened, several kids died over some time in the Blue Hole Pond. They built this beach in Estabrook Park so that people would have a place to swim safely. Well, of course, like the rest of the river, it got polluted, and by 1945, nobody went there anymore. And now it looks like this. Same view. You can't even tell there was ever a beach there. The west side across the river from Estabrook Park is all in private hands. However, there is a trail because of the River Revitalization Foundation purchased easements. This took many years of effort to do. Purchased easements all along the river from all of the property owners. So there is a trail on both sides of the river. If you go down, and the one on that side of the river is called the Westabrook Trail, as opposed to the Estabrook Park. If you walk down the Westabrook Trail, you will come to these sculptures. These sculptures were made by this man, Tom Quaff. There are three. The one he's standing next to, the foundation of that sculpture came out of the river. The rocks of this turtle sculpture came out of a dam, and in the background of that picture, you see that steel structure. That's a gate from the original Estabrook Dam. There was a dam at Estabrook Park until 2018. For many years before 2018, there was an effort to remove the dam, and that was fought fiercely by neighbors upstream who wanted a lake because they lived along the lake. But that eventually forces that wanted the dam removed, got it removed. Question? Yeah, I'll get back to that. I'll answer that. So he created all three of these sculptures from the remnants of the dam once it was removed, and he was commissioned to do that by the Milwaukee River Keeper. This is located right across from Estabrook beer garden. So you can't see it from the beer garden, but if you walk along the trail, you can't miss them. This is where the Estabrook Dam used to be. Can you see my arrow here? Yes. So this channel over here was created by the Civilian Conservation Corps. There was no channel here. They blasted this out of the limestone. This was the original channel. They did this to create the actual dam, and then there was a serpentine spillway over here on the natural one. This is the widest part of the whole river. So, well, between the two of these. But that's where it used to be and is no longer. The advantage of taking out a dam is to allow for a more natural river and fish passage up and down, migration up and down the river, among other things. By the way, if you have any question, I'm going fairly quickly because we don't have a lot of time, but if you have a question, if you're going south from Westabrook, you get to Capitol Drive, and you cross Capitol Drive, you get to Kern Park. Kern Park was named after the man whose land it used to be. He was a major industrialist, owned flour mills along Commerce Avenue below the dam, the North Avenue Dam, when it was there. And he built a mansion on this property, along with several other industrial millionaires at the time. This was, again, early 20th century. And he eventually donated this land to become Kern Park. The other this was once known as Milwaukee's Gold Coast, because all of these mansions were built all along the west bank of the Milwaukee River, just south of Capitol Drive. None of the others exist anymore. They were all developed into housing. In Kern Park, you will find very tiny flowers on the right, the jewelweed, but on the left, a giant tree. Do you know what a champion tree is? Who knows what a champion tree is? Nobody? Okay. Oh, what's a champion tree? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, so I'll just answer it's a state record size tree. Okay, so it's the largest of its species in the state of Wisconsin. So we call it a champion tree, and it's right here in Milwaukee in Kern Park. And there are 5 or 6 other plane trees almost as big as it is in Kern Park. So it's quite an unusual place. Another picture of Kern Park. Moving south again, still on the west bank, is a park known as, and that's hidden there, Pleasant Valley Park. Pleasant Valley got its name. This is an unusual park for many reasons. First, if you try to find it, you'll have trouble because there's no signage. You can walk all the way along the trail, all the way up north, north and south along the river on the west bank, and you will never see a Pleasant Valley Park sign, either coming north or coming south. There is access from Concordia Avenue on the top of the bluff. There's a trail that goes down into the park. There's no sign there for who knows why. So there's no signage telling you you're in Pleasant Valley Park. The other interesting thing is it's entirely natural looking now, but except for one detail, but it used to be a major resort establishment. When this was backed up behind a dam, it was a lake. It wasn't a river anymore. It was a long, thin lake. And for 2 miles from North Avenue to Capitol Drive, it was a long, thin lake that was developed by many entities into resorts for recreation. This was developed by the Blatz Beer Company, and they called it Pleasant Valley. They had a major beer garden here, along with a ballroom, a swimming school, boating, bridle trails, cottages to rent, all kinds. It was a major resort. And you go there now, you can see none of it. It's all gone. There is one weird thing in Pleasant Valley Park, and that's this bridge, which seems to have no purpose. If you go there, you can walk across it, but it goes across a ravine, and the trail, the main trail, is down below. It's not up here on top of the ravine. And if you have no idea, you can't tell, but it's an aqueduct. It's not intended to be a bridge at all. when it was built, they put the bridge railing on top of it so people wouldn't try to walk across it unsafely. But it's an aqueduct carrying sewage for MMSD to the deep tunnel. This is still Pleasant Valley Park. This is the ravine over which that bridge goes, that aqueduct. And this is 2 years later, the same view. So this was eroding badly. So they stabilized it and they planted new plants, and now it looks like that. Right? Good question. So the stewards of the Greenway are multiple agencies. Most of the parkland is county parkland. So the county would be responsible ultimately for all of the county parkland. However, they have partnerships with the Urban Ecology Center and the River Revitalization Foundation, who do a lot of the maintenance, and we're likely, I don't know in this case, but we're likely responsible for that restoration. The Urban Ecology Center tends to do the stretch from Locust Street to North Avenue on the east bank. The River Revitalization Foundation does most of the rest of the Greenway. We're going to get to where they're located later in the tour. This is a small property right on the river that's owned by the Quakers. Their meeting house is beautifully situated on this nice little piece of property. It's open to the public. It's private land, but it's open to the public. You can walk along the river and you're into their property here. Just south of that is one of the few big architectural structures in the Greenway, and it's still working. The water works. Water gets pumped from the Linwood plant on the lakefront through a tunnel to get to this pumping station, and then this pumps it out into the community. Yes. So I've been jumping back and forth across the river. So we're on the west side now, and there is a trail. There is a trail on both sides of the river for most of the length of the river. And I'm going to come back to that, but thanks for asking. And by the way, bicycling is not allowed on these trails. Bicycling is encouraged on the Oak Leaf Trail, of course, the paved trails, but the dirt trails, that is where we are here in this picture, people do it, but it's technically illegal. We mentioned this is on the east side. Now we mentioned Hubbard Park earlier. This is what Hubbard Park, how many of you have been to Hubbard Park before? Most of you. So you've probably had this experience. You park in that tiny little parking lot on the east side of the Oak Leaf Trail, which used to be the railroad, and you go through that pedestrian tunnel. Cool experience. You're walking through this tunnel, and this is what you see when you walk out into the park. It's just spectacular in any season, but I particularly love it in the winter when it looks like this. South of Hubbard Park is a long, thin park named Cambridge Woods. It has no development in it like Pleasant Valley Park, which is opposite it. There are no buildings, there's no picnic tables, there's no nothing except nature. It's only 24 acres and it's skinny. It's wedged between what used to be the railroad, the Oak Leaf Trail, and the river. And it has the best wildflowers in the Greenway. I mean, there are wonderful wildflowers all over the place, but the best ones are here in Cambridge Woods. How many of you know what we have here? This is very well known, popular flower. That's the white trillium. This is also a trillium. This is a prairie trillium or red trillium. Of course, Jack in the Pulpit is very popular, very well known. The one down in the lower right is choke cherry. And the one on the upper right, have you ever heard of the forked aster? The Milwaukee County Park System has a system of dirt trails that they call the Forked Aster Trail. And this Cambridge Woods has a Forked Aster Trail in it. The Forked Aster Trail is a threatened species, and it's not well known where there are large numbers of it. And I'm not going to tell you exactly where to find them, but there are patches of it here in Cambridge Woods. Cambridge Woods does have a couple of distinctive things about it. And one of them is the tunnel to nowhere, which you're seeing here. It's the railroad went overhead, which is now the Oak Leaf Trail. And if you go and look into this tunnel, you expect to see daylight at the other end, and you don't because there's a concrete wall. There used to be daylight at the other end when it was built, but there was a ravine on the other side that used to be a ravine and is now filled in, and houses are on top of it. So that got developed. So they blocked off the end of this tunnel. It was originally built so that Schlitz Brewing Company could, which owned the land here, could get ice out of the river and distribute it to their beer plant. I'm going to mention that again later. Okay, we're going to go across the river to Gordon Park. Now we're south of Locust Street at this point. On the west side, this is obviously a historic picture. Thank you. I can't say everything because we're going to run out of time, but since you mentioned it, in addition to this tunnel to nowhere, one of the distinctive things about Cambridge Woods is there used to be a neighborhood in this park. Again, it's a narrow space between the railroad and the river, and there were a row of houses along the bluff known as River Colony at one time. It was never electrified. They didn't have running water, but there were people living there until the 1950s. Now, if you walk along the East Bank Trail, you'll see the foundations of about 5 or 6 of them as you go by. They're all full of graffiti now, but you will, unless you know, you would wonder what are these things doing here? But they're former houses. So back to Gordon Park. In 1927, there was not only a ski jump in Gordon Park at the top of the bluff that led you all the way down to the river, but there were thousands of people there watching this. Can you imagine that happening in the Milwaukee River today? Anywhere along the Milwaukee River for any kind of event? It doesn't happen anymore. This is essentially, I couldn't get up as high as this viewpoint, but this is essentially the same place today. When this Greenway, what is now the Greenway, back in 1843 and thereabouts, the entire place would have been logged because lumber was money and it was fuel and it was construction materials. Lumber was incredibly valuable, but now we value the green space, and so we've allowed the trees to grow back. So this is a postcard showing what Riverside Park looked like from Gordon Park back in the day when Olmsted designed it. And you can see the roof and the structure of a pavilion that no longer exists. If you go to Riverside Park, this staircase leading from the river from the lake to the pavilion is still there, but that's all. Nothing is left of Olmsted's original design because of how everything went into disrepair when nobody kept going there over the years. This is what Riverside Park looks like now, part of it. And there's an oval trail that goes around this platform, kind of a flat area that they call the Olmsted promenade, beautiful old oak trees and maple trees. All right. I hope you've all heard of the Urban Ecology Center. So this man is the former, and this is the first time I've given this talk when I had to say that, because he just retired this past year as executive director. Ken Lineback was executive director of the Urban Ecology Center since it was founded in 1991. So quite a long time. The thing about the Urban Ecology Center is that it isn't just a fantastic environmental education center, which it is, mostly catering to school children, but it's got lots of adult programming as well. But it also transformed Riverside Park. It was dangerous to go into Riverside Park. People didn't. Lots of drug activities going on there in the 1970s and 80s. The center was founded in 1991 in a deliberate effort to take back the park and make it safe again. And it was successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And they now have, as you probably know, 3 Urban Ecology Center buildings, one in Washington Park, one in Three Bridges Park, and this original one in Riverside Park. Right next to Riverside Park is a fairly new space called the Rotary Centennial Arboretum. This is where that factory was that I showed you earlier in the program. It is now this beautiful space. Especially when the flowers are all in bloom. July, August, September are the best months to go to the Arboretum. Connecting all of this on the east side is the East Bank Trail that was developed by the River Revitalization Foundation and Urban Ecology Center, and it eventually extended all the way from one end to Lincoln Park, from the dam, the original dam below North Avenue, all the way to Lincoln Park along the East Bank. You could walk a total of 7 river miles without crossing a road, and walk along the road in Lincoln Park another mile to get up to Silver Spring. So you could have a nice hike for a long distance and not feel like you're in the city. The West Bank isn't as continuous because when you get to Port Washington, you have to stop. This private land north of Port Washington. Sir.
This is a 2-part thing. You didn't mention Fletch Park or Doctor's Park, and also you partner with Milwaukee Water Company.
Thank you. So I didn't mention those 2 parks because they're not part of the Greenway. If you go to one of my talks that covers all of Milwaukee County, I would certainly want to include both Doctor's Park and Kletch Park. Kletch Park is on the river but it's upriver from Silver Spring in Glendale. Doctor's Park's on the lakefront, of course, so it's not part of the Greenway either. So that's not why I'm bringing those up. Milwaukee Water Commons is a separate nonprofit organization, and no, I'm not affiliated with them.
Okay.
Thank you. If you're walking along the East Bank Trail at North Avenue, you will come across these murals painted by this woman, Melanie, on the pillars that are holding up the North Avenue Bridge. On the west side, there is a trail. There's a dirt trail along the river, but the Oak Leaf Trail is up high on the bluff on the east side. On the west side, there's what's called the Beer Line Trail. It only goes to Locust Street, but it connects the southern end of the Greenway to Locust Street. And it follows the original railroad that was on this site, which was known as the Beer Line, because the breweries used it to transport their products, beer out of the city and ice into the city. This is the West Bank Trail along the river. Now, most of the Riverway doesn't have buildings visible along it like this. Let me see what I put here. Yeah, so right at this point, we're close to North Avenue here. This is a historic factory that has been there for well over 100 years. So it was already there. When the Greenway was established, rules were created. This building, this is a dormitory of all things on the river at North Avenue. UWM, in its wisdom, decided why not put students here on the river, but I won't go into that. Well, what you can see this building very clearly because it's built right up against the edge of the bluff and the trees were cut down for the view for the students. Even if it weren't students, I'm just making fun of them, but even if it weren't for students, the Greenway idea is brilliant. This is something that we have over Central Park in New York, because if you've ever been to Central Park, it's fantastic. But it's a walled park. The city is everywhere evident all the way around it. The brilliance of the Greenway is not only was the land protected, but the view was protected, except where things were already existed. This dormitory was built before the Greenway was established. Right across the river, in its wisdom, UWM built another dormitory after the Greenway was built. And look, even in the wintertime, it's hard to see that building. In the summertime, you can't see it at all. That's the beauty of the Greenway. They protected the experience of nature and not just the land. A brilliant concept. South of Capitol. Yeah. I wish he's referring to an apartment complex that was built since the Greenway was established south of Capitol on the east side in Shorewood. And I don't know how they got an exception because you can see that building from the river. I wish I could answer that question. Oh, you live in that apartment? Well, you have the advantage. So this is the dam, which is now, it's not a dam, as you can see. It's now a pedestrian bridge. On the east side is Caesars Park. And on the west side, what do we have here? This is still Caesars Park. From the top of the bluff, you're looking across the bridge to condominiums on the other side of the river. And then on the west side is a little park, 4 acres, called Turtle Park, privately owned by the River Revitalization Foundation. And their headquarters is located in the park. You can just see the roof. It's a green roof in the background of this picture. It used to be an old house and they converted it into their offices. The River Revitalization Foundation is a land trust, which they're responsible for saving, protecting, owning land. And they don't own a lot of land, but they own this park among a few other places along the river. Their interest is primarily the Milwaukee River corridor. All right, so how are we doing for time? I don't see a clock anywhere. Oh, here clock. We have very little time. So I'm not going to get through the rest of there's more, but we don't need to get through all of it. I just want to mention, I'll go as far as you, until you cut me off, but I want to allow for questions at this point. And then if we have time, I can tell you a little bit more. Since we're looking at her, anybody know who Cheryl Nan is? This is Cheryl Nan. She's a good friend of mine. I was on the board of Milwaukee Riverkeeper when we hired Cheryl Nan. I'm very proud of that because she is a major asset to this city. She wrote a chapter of the book about wildlife. Anyway, questions? I want to give you a chance to answer. That's an interesting question. So the land is all owned by somebody. Most of the land is already in public ownership by Milwaukee County. Some of it, there's a Shorewood Park, there's the River Revitalization private park, and there's a few parcels that are privately owned, like the Quaker property. And there's easements along all of it until you get to Port Washington, right? I don't know of any land that's available. Probably not. I mean, I suppose it's conceivable that one of the private properties could come up for sale, but it doesn't seem likely. Other questions? Let's go back here. Whoops, wrong way. I'm going to go back to that. So this is the home of the River Revitalization Foundation. Turtle Park used to be what you're talking about, the Melinex Wheelhouse. If you remember that, it was a restaurant on the river at the dam. They specialized in murder mystery dinners. This whole 4-acre park, except for the building, the restaurant building, was parking lot. And now it's a lovely prairie. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I don't know whether the building was a good structure or not structurally. I don't know, but they wanted a park. So the building, I mean, if you remember the building, it sort of looked a little bit like a boat, but it wasn't like it was a replica of a boat. It was just had kind of I don't think it was of historical significance. But I'm just speculating there. I don't know. Any other questions? Want to see some wildlife? So Cheryl wrote the chapter in the book about the wildlife. I took some of these pictures, but other photographers contributed to the book as well. And you can see the names there. This is a great horned owl. We have a hummingbird. We have turtles. We have beavers. Controversial animal. We have snakes and spiders. Got to have snakes and spiders, right? Okay, that's the end of the wildlife. There's more wildlife, but that's all I put into the show.